Hi, my name is Philipp. I'm the General Manager for Entrepreneur First here in Germany. Entrepreneur First is the leading talent investor globally, founded in 2011. Happy to be here today.
All right, thank you. Florian?
Yes, hello. I've had the pleasure also to speak earlier on. I'm a managing partner of Bamboo Capital Partners. We are an impact investing firm focused on public and private partnerships, very much on technology going forward.
All right, thank you. All right, Tobias.
Hi, my name is Tobias. I'm investment manager at Sunbo Angel Partners. We are a multi-corporate CVC headquartered in South Korea and just started operations in Europe from here in Berlin.
All right, thank you very much, all of you. So we have a very interesting panel today. I think we've got a broad selection of investors across different investor buckets in this innovation ecosystem. And in fact, I want to start there. I think what we've seen over the last decade is this trend of democratization in this traditionally very private industry of venture capital, and more venture funds are coming online and telling people about what they do, and opening the doors behind what used to be a very closed shop industry. And now we have broad selection. So Philipp with Entrepreneurs First, he also, I understand, is an angel investor himself, apart from running the innovation program. Florian obviously is an institutional fund, and Tobias is managing a corporate VC. So my first question is, in the spirit of democratization now, in this venture capital value chain, right? You guys raise funds, you source for investments, you do investments, you support your portfolio, and you help them exit. So across those 5 functional areas, where have you felt the biggest impact because of this pandemic? So maybe let's start with Philipp.
So first of all, it's quite important to understand that Entrepreneur First, as a talent investor, we invest in pre-seed phase and we invest into the seed phase. So here we see actually at the moment not the strongest impact, especially with an investment hypothesis that is very close leaning to deep tech, because we have a long R&D phase, and the R&D phase is carried with our pre-seed and seed investment. Meaning, where we see a bigger impact than in pre-seed and seed is, of course, in Series A and Series B, because Series A and Series B always involves revenue, and revenue actually is affected, I think, over the last 6 months, and would potentially affect it over the next 12 months as well. So at the moment, we are in a lucky position as a talent investor with a pre-seed seed focus that we don't see that much impact yet at the moment.
All right, great. Maybe I'll then pass it on to Florian. Are you doing B and C investments?
So we used to originally, very early on, over a decade ago, to do B plus focus, but we have moved earlier and earlier. So we're actually doing, as of seed stage now, again, close to commercial. And you have seen, of course, the different pivot, because also we went from non-tech to tech-enabled, then also to pure tech. Again, still the same geographies in same sectors, which is servicing the low-income population in emerging markets. That's our sweet spot. But that's a pivot we see. And of course, now during COVID times, the wave or the impact of COVID itself is later than the developed countries. You can see that right now. It is more silent, so less newsworthy, but much more devastating, because it's not only a health and an economical impact, it also has a humanitarian impact. However, we see the more tech we have been investing, the better the companies will do from an equity standpoint, because their adoption rate is now faster, because the digitalization goes much more aggressive, compared to our old investments, non-tech, that you have a clear effect here on the valuation of these companies going down.
Yeah, so I think you're talking a lot about the impact already of the work that you do, but I think I wanted to start first just on the day-to-day job, right? How has the pandemic actually affected your role, your day-to-day, and which part of the value chain do you see the biggest change? And maybe more importantly, what change because of the pandemic do you want to retain moving forward? What's been good? Let's give us some good news here.
Is it still to me?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, yes. So sorry for that. Look, it's interesting because the way we have to do due diligence for us to invest is changing. It has to change. Right now, we're not traveling. Everybody's grounded. But we're still raising funds and we're deploying funds. Actually, we have learnings also, even on our firm itself. You know, we just concluded a strategic transaction of a large group into our company, all during the lockdown, all fully digitally. And there was a lot of learnings that actually due diligence, when you do them fully digitally, they are safer and better in terms of storage because you do interviews which are basically recorded and stored. So everything digitally, you have full proof of, you know, of all the data you've given, the data have been analyzed. And of course, the groups interacted from in our case, it's a Australian large group with people all around the world. So it's not the old days in a longer cumbersome and more expensive way where you would travel, then meet, you have people around, airtime, downtime, sitting there, going back and forth, doing some lists, sending some emails and working up. It's all digitally. So it's much faster. It is from a data, let's say from a documentation point of view of due diligence, much better. Because you add on facets which you wouldn't have done in the past. Yeah, because you would not have been there with the recorder, somebody recording. But if you have a Zoom call and you exchange data, when you exchange information, that's recorded. So you see a shift in, again, as you said, there's a positive side of less expensive, faster, and actually better traced than before from the due diligence side. But then, of course, there's a negative side that there's face-to-face, you know, actually the human need of doing, you know, if I decide to invest, I want to see something, you know, somebody, I want to be with them, I want to have maybe a dinner and just to get a feeling about the grasp of the company and how they are on the ground is what I lack today. However, maybe it's not what I really need. So I would clearly see that as we are investing globally and we have a distributed team in the world, for us probably to run the company is much cheaper, much more effective from the COVID learnings.
All right. So what I'm hearing is the tech investors are finally getting tech savvy. So I guess that's a good thing. I'll pass it along now to Tobias. I mean, the traditional knock on corporate investors is that they're, you know, like they're too slow. I mean, they come from a strategic perspective, which is good in one sense, but at the same time, it makes them more, you know, like take a narrow focus. But in your case, it's different. And you actually launched your fund in the middle of this pandemic. So, I mean, tell us about, you know, how you're viewing this differently than other corporates out there. And, you know, let's try to inspire the other corporates to follow your footsteps, I guess.
I mean, to be honest, the fund was launched before the pandemic.
Okay.
We just started basically operations here in Europe, just in the middle of the pandemic. I mean, you see it. I'm not coming from South Korea. I haven't been any times there. I basically met at the beginning of the year our management here in Berlin. Then we started like the process, and it's managed all by calls, and that's like, I mean, it's coming. It's about the fund structure. It's about all legal topics by launching a fund. It's about the processes you basically establish to invest in startups, and we did it like in a time totally where we can't meet each other, right? So everything is digitized right now, and so our whole process is basically online in that. And also, like, I mean, meeting our investment committee in South Korea, like we are organizing, for example, so we have 120 corporates, South Korean SMEs in our network, and we're organizing once a month a kind of roundtable event where we invite startups we found here and consider to be interesting to basically pitch in front of the corporates. Normally we fly them in to South Korea. This time we basically did a video, did a transcript of the pitch, translated it into Korean, so to make sure everyone understands it, which is like, I've never done this effort before for a pitch, right? And that's, but I think it's a really good thing, because what I kind of experience is that the less we see as physical, the more accessible gets the venture capital scene, the more transparent it's getting, kind of, because everything happens online. Like LinkedIn is exploding right now. I feel there's so many requests coming through this channel. And basically, you answer all those requests. Like normally, you was waiting for a warm intro from somebody else. You basically know. Now it's basically all in your inbox, and you just go down the list. So it basically makes it more accessible. I feel.
Yep. And so your fund, as a corporate venture fund, you actually invest early stage. That's correct?
Yes, very early.
What tickets do you do?
It depends on. So we invest in deep tech. And the more research intensive a startup is, the earlier we can get in. So it's up to 300K. That's our sweet spot on this stage. And we love to finance university spin-outs and leverage that also with public funding. And on later stage, we have a second fund on later stage where we invest. That's a pure follow-up fund. Basically, we invest up to 3 million. And then we do very rarely single-handedly investments with this fund. So it's more for follow-up, basically.
Yeah. And I find that quite unique because, I mean, if you look at the history of corporate venture capital, a lot of them are more comfortable investing at the later stages, right? Growth up until pre-IPO. Whereas you guys have really set up a fund to do early stage investments. And what corporates have done in that space in the past is more like incubation programs, like innovation programs, where they can really get their hands dirty and be involved and help de-risk. So what are you seeing different? And do you think that this is a trend now that corporates actually set up funds to do early stage investing?
I would really wish that it will become a trend. I mean, in Germany, we've worked like years back when I was at the German Startup Association. We tried to build a kind of Mittelstand fund, so a SME fund in Germany, and this became Comparion, basically, which is still not a SME fund, right? It's only public money involved there. So I'd really wish that it becomes a trend and that corporates, especially in Germany, where the SMEs are basically the backbone of the whole industry, of the whole economy, that those corporates start to experiment and do less strategic investment, more experimentation.
So Philipp, we'll go to you now. I mean, how do the changes downstream, you know, like what the corporates are doing, what the institutional funds are doing, how do those changes on those investor buckets affect what you're doing at the very early stages? I mean, how does this impact the way you help these companies now start up with these founders as an angel investor? I mean, we want to understand, you know, the differences across the different investing buckets. So, I mean, we need to start with you.
I think what is important about Entrepreneur First is we are talent investors. So that means we actually invest in people before they have an idea and before they have a team. But of course, we look for specific qualities in these people. We look for specific behavioral qualities, but also specific abilities. In Germany, we have a system, an educational system and an economic system where like these people are strongly incentivized to actually go exactly to these corporates. Translating into a lot of talent, which is for us the most important resource to actually build these companies, it's at the moment in corporates. So if corporates right now start to invest more in startups that we are building, that's extremely well for us. We are looking actually even one step before that. We're looking into like getting these people found their own companies, which are at the moment in the research institute of BASF, BMW, etc., etc., etc. Because we believe with this, with founding their own company, they can actually increase the impact for their own lives, for the lives of a lot of others, and for the German economy as well. And not only the German economy, of course, like in the 6 countries where we are active.
Right.
So, yeah.
And So, I mean, from your lens now as an investor, your framework for investing, the companies that you look for, I mean, there are some obvious verticals that benefit, right? Like health tech and med tech that require funding. I mean, tell us some of the non-obvious stuff, like some non-obvious verticals that should get more funding during these times, but maybe are not, like getting enough respect.
I mean, we also have the investment hypothesis deep tech at the moment. And I think deep tech, it was interesting just like in the first, during COVID, I think there was 340 million new capital announced that is completely focused on deep tech with VC squared and as well with 486 and 468 capital, which is quite interesting. So this is more a layer approach from our point of view. And we will stick to this layer approach over the next years, which is like, okay, tech core or deep tech as a layer. In terms of verticals, I think what we see thriving at the moment, as I said before, is remote diagnostics. So we have a company, AcroX, in UK, which achieved 98% penetration with general practitioners in UK for remote or digital conferencing, also like digital patient interactions, but also edtech is booming. So another company in our portfolio, Lingumi, which is doing a learning platform for toddlers. They had a 120% increase in sales over COVID and also sign-ups and suddenly in 91 countries. As I'm not a parent myself yet, but potentially, I think homeschooling, etc., became a very, very big topic. So I think this is a vertical which is interesting for us, which we are looking at, especially then when there is a tech core that will allow them to scale.
Mm-hmm. Florian, anything you can add there? You have, I guess, the broadest coverage here in terms of industries and geographies. What are you seeing maybe in Asia?
Look, again, we are laser focused.
Okay.
Yes, I'm just saying, laser focused on companies serving the low to middle income population in emerging markets. So it's always the same sectors, always the same models, of course, different countries, but at the end, the rural population has the same issue. Whether they are in Myanmar, whether they are in Togo, or whether they are in Honduras. So that's where we look at. Now, technology is a big blessing here because we see business models which are exciting. We see that we have to put a low amount of money in the company and the adoption rate of the technology is extremely fast, because you don't have any incumbent technology. So again, the bet is really here that you have to do then, there has to have a certain local component of a business model in, so that you do that in a country and in a way that, or in a region where it makes sense. And actually, for example, we collaborate with Smart Africa. We have a fund together with Smart Africa, who's seeded by the African government and by Luxembourg government, Ivory Coast and Luxembourg. And it's very exciting because it's tech seed stage investment in the same geographies. And again, we look at fintech, clean tech, ed tech, agri-tech, health tech, which are typically these, the rural population, which is most of them are smallholder farming related or local productions. Their technology, blockchain, smart contracts, distributed ledgers is really a way to interact, and we see that we have to take much less financial risk. The only thing is we need a longer period of time. So we're not looking for IRRs like Silicon Valley style. I have a bag of 15 companies to invest in, and I have 2 IPOs, and I'm all happy. The rest is crap. But the 2 make the finances of the fund. It doesn't work. The 3 to 5 year window doesn't work. We need 7 to 10 year window. We basically build up a company over time. Then we double down. We like to do then seed, joint, to double down in Series A, double down in Series B, maybe. They've done actually recently Series C of one of the exciting investment in a tech platform, electrifying individual households in Africa. So those are the things we see. Now, that's what I'm saying. It's a little bit different. Yes, AI is a component, very important. Deep learning deep tech is important because it increases the dematerialization of goods and services. So no cash, all data, much, more, it's faster information we get and more precise, no Excel shovelings like in the old time. So those are the things where we see, and there's two components. Either we have tech-enabled one, a company which is there, which is not initially not tech, but now moving tech, or a pure tech model. So those are the things we see, and it's extremely exciting because it's a massive transformation of the landscape in emerging markets with a long growth we see there. Of course, there is a certain, let's say, impact on COVID itself, as it now reaches even the rural population in emerging markets, being very devastating because healthcare is not there. However, it's a much younger population, so therefore, percentage-wise, they're a little bit less affected. However, the excitement we see is the digitalization and accelerated models. So it's very, very different to the old type of investments we did, 13 years ago without technology.
Yep. Maybe as a follow-up, I mean, you say laser focus, but obviously emerging markets, there are many like market nuances and cultural nuances. What I guess I wanted to ask earlier was, is there any way that you look at markets in Latin America or Africa differently than you would in Asia? Like, I mean, are there different investing lenses, that are very particular to the Asian market versus a European market?
Honestly, non-tech is huge, the difference. If it's pure tech, marginally, because at the end, we're getting standardized. The way we connect on devices, the way we exchange data. So yes, you have maybe sometimes the price point would be different because you have a richer and a poorer country, so the pricing model might be different. Yes, there is maybe some cultural habits when you look at the fintech company, for example. But again, we have one now in Nigeria we invested in. They just started to come to Europe. So it's really not that different in terms of, because technology is, it doesn't have boundaries. Of course, you need to have language skills. You need to have a little bit of a notion of how a service is being delivered maybe in DRC is different than in Myanmar slightly. But at the end, the model, the key component of the model and the key technology is pretty much the same. And that's what makes it much easier for us. So as we spread our risks, not in one country, but we like to, exchange rate risks and so on, because we invest mostly in local currency. So that there is a spread there. But I think these notions of, you can do business only in Angola, the Angolan way, in Honduras, the Honduran way, might have been, yes, for microfinance we did, for example, early on, 10, 12 years ago, but not for fintech.
All right, understand. Philipp, anything you can add there? I mean, I know you also have a lot of locations and hubs globally. I mean, anything interesting you're seeing from the perspective of like market nuances and differences in investing frameworks?
I mean, as I said before, like in the impact on talent is definitely different in markets. So we see, like in Singapore, for example, we see definitely a decline in applications. It seems like becoming an entrepreneur is even more risky in Singapore than actually becoming an entrepreneur here in Germany, and also like actually less socially accepted. And now with like this pandemic happening, we see definitely there's a bigger personal private risk, and people are less risk affine than they are here in Europe even. The opposite is actually true for example in Bangalore. In Bangalore, in India, and we see like a surge in applications, very talented people. Our team is working hard to actually filter across over like thousands of applications that were not there before. So I think in terms of our talent pipeline, we see huge differences. In terms of funding, how our companies get funded on the pre-seed and seed phase, actually we didn't see that much local differences yet, to be fair. Mm-hmm. But we expect as well, I mean, our last cohort just like graduated now in July. Meaning like they are now fundraising, so we can actually reevaluate this in January or in February.
All right. Tobias, I mean, you've said you haven't been to the Korean headquarters, but maybe you have anything to share from your colleagues or any case studies worth mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, regarding Korea, but I think Korea is a bit special. On this, I would basically disagree. I see a lot of differences. I mean, the whole, like all kind of software or websites we're using here are basically also in Korea, but it's Korean and they do it in a different way. So, for example, they don't use LinkedIn. They use a card scanning app which also connects contacts. They don't use WhatsApp. There's Kakao Talk and the Korean WeChat. They have everything like built everything what's in our Western world, but in a kind of Korean way. And they are. And it's basically not just because the market is closed. It's because the users are basically loyal to their national products. Yeah. And even yesterday here at AsiaBerlin, I had a discussion with a startup who was building a B2B software as a service model, cloud-based for corporates, kind of AI model. And in his sales efforts in Korea, he figured out that the corporates there don't like this cloud model. They want to have it local on a local server in their factory plants. So I'm pretty sure there are a lot of differences. And even like if you start to use these products, you find like different features on places where you don't expect them. Yeah. And that's I think that there are cultural reasons for that. Like so, the whole user flow needs to be basically changed in a culture matching figure. Yeah.
Right. So let's follow that line of thought. I mean, so let's say you find the right kinds of founders and technologies that make sense now to bring back to Korea. How are you helping them do that? Let's talk about, portfolio support. Like, I mean, you have this strong network of 120 SMEs behind you. Like, how do you actually go about trying to help them enter that market? I know you've only started, but like, I mean, in theory, what do you guys want to do?
So, you mean from Europe to Korea or from Korea to Europe?
Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Okay. So so we're basically right now working on such a project where we help a German startup basically go to Korea. It's not a pure distribution help. Yes, so we basically identified a corporate in our corporate alliance network. This corporate has a strong consumer access, has a strong technology, and a startup which basically enhance this technology. So what both are doing right now, so what we were basically working on is to set up a kind of joint venture structure and build together a totally new product. So we're financing this joint venture between the corporate and the startups, and they built something totally new, which can be suited to the Korean market. I mean, it's a long process because you have to rethink the whole value chain of that innovation. But hopefully next year I can tell you more about that project. Right. So when the other way around, we haven't yet made any. So it's called we call it like value up. So it's our portfolio companies we basically introduce into the German market. So we haven't done yet any project on that. The reason is basically obvious. It's pandemics. So we basically wanted to start it with that by inviting some of our portfolio startups to basically AsiaBerlin Summit because it's a great opportunity. But didn't work out, unfortunately. All right.
Florian, I mean, could you share with us also some of the things you do? I mean, portfolio support-wise?
I mean, yes, and it depends whether it's, we have some debt funds and we have equity funds. So the interaction is different when you monitor the debt, it is less engaged with the management itself compared to a debt investment. Yeah, so usually we do larger minority stakes. We don't like to control. We don't want to put the management. It's really support the entrepreneurs. So we do sit on the board. We have a board observer to it. And then besides the capital bringing into, and that's really the caveat also as we impact investor, and we measure not only the financial return, but we're measuring also what's happening on the ground, especially because our new funds are blended finance funds where we have catalytic capital coming from NGOs or from governments in it to then de-risk, investment for private investors. And there it's a little bit different because we use their footprint on the ground. They have large teams on the ground, you know, in many countries. So one part is when we become investment ready, we use technical assistance money from they have to get the company investable. Yeah, very often is the case because it's the early stage. Once we invest, we do slice the cake. You know, we need to over time, you know, do convertible, then an equity round, and then further to really work with the management. The caveat we bring to is, as we net impact investor, we also want the clear reporting on what is happening on the ground on the beneficiary, you know, the users itself, in terms of poverty uplift, in terms of economic inclusion, in terms of electrification of households, for example. I mean, the different aspects to it. Each fund has a clear impact framework where we measure exactly what's on the ground. Otherwise, you would not get non-for-profit catalytic capital in because they don't want financial returns. They want to make sure that what's the transformation on the ground. And then also when we invest in a company, we work with the entrepreneurs. We look very much also on the ecosystem. We look to connect them with industry. For example, we did it recently, for example, a joint venture with EDF, the French company in Togo. So that when we either bring them to the tables, because we like to have strategic investors in the companies at a certain time, because it's just de-risks rather than a pure financial play. And then also when it comes to the management itself, you know, to make sure that the company is upgraded in terms of compliance and reporting, HR, and then of course, depending on what we do, you know, when the focus is on livelihoods and we want to go into the missing middle, which is below when generally banks would lend, you know, it has a different risk scenario. So also we need to prepare for that risk accordingly. I mean, there are many aspects to it. This is why we have it's much more cumbersome for us to do the investment and work with the company than from a pure financial point of view because of the impact side.
Yep. So what you said, I find very important, that you bring in strategic investors over time. And unfortunately, at the time that it gets to you, sometimes there's damage that's irreparable already, right? Because how founders build their cap tables, the sorts of investors that they bring along very early on has a big effect on how they grow and how they scale. And maybe I'll throw that question to you, Philipp, because I mean, this is something where I guess you provide a lot of mentorship, right? Like what sort of advice do you provide to your founders after their program once they start fundraising with institutionals? Like, what do you tell them? You know, like, I mean, in terms of onboarding investors, those early institutionals coming onto their cap table, like, what should they be looking for?
Yes, I mean, we have a very good understanding about what are good terms and what are bad terms. And I think especially during the beginning of the pandemic, there were suddenly a lot of term sheets popping up with very bad and very founder unfriendly terms. So I think we supported there with country-specific guidance, etc. Overall, what we give our teams when they are actually graduating our program and start raising their seed round, but also the Series A, they have access to a venture partner. And venture partner, we have a local layer of venture partner. We doubled down on that actually as well during the pandemic. And they have like huge understanding, very deep understanding of the local ecosystem, of the local investors, about the advantages, disadvantages of some investors, and understand the term sheets extremely well. And then we have like the global investors like Benedict Evans, for example, the former analyst of Andreessen Horowitz, who then provide our startups with vertical expertise. And these two venture partners, they work in a tandem, supporting our startups actually on the Series A and on the seed round. And with that, we can actually ensure that they get the best terms and that they have and they get the best support country-wise, country-specific support.
You put the Pandora's box on the table. Let's open it, Philipp. So you said bad terms. Like, I mean, get into the details. Tell the founders in our audience, like, what bad terms look like. Jump into a few things.
I mean, mostly we saw just like suddenly like convertible loans suddenly becoming much more favorable for the investor suddenly when the pandemic kicked in, etc. I think these were the terms that we recognized immediately, and we just encourage our founders to not suddenly to more or less keep the track on their valuation and what they want to achieve, and not like actually suddenly getting diluted crazily just because like a pandemic hit, etc. I mean, that was the early a very early reaction from some partners in the VC market we saw. Not many, but some. And this was then flagged immediately by our venture partners, for example. I think on other terms, I really would not like to get into details here, actually.
All right, fair enough. I mean, maybe Tobias, I'll hand you the same question. Like, what are bad terms? I mean, you coming in now, investing, I mean, there are some people on the cap table already. Like, what are clear red flags to you that you think, oh, wow, this cap table's a bit messed up already, or, you know, there are some terms in the previous rounds that make it unfavorable for investors down the line to come in and support this company? Like, are there any like clear red flags that you watch out for?
I mean, what I, for example, see from, I mean, Poland is also one of my kind of hobby markets because that has family reasons. But I, for example, see from that area are like nearly 50% angel deals, for example, which is like it's very hard to basically. Show investment interests after you see such deals. Too high liquidation preferences is a problem, especially if they're not kept. I mean, there are a lot of tricks. Yeah.
All right, fair. Maybe let's take a pause here and maybe just ask the audience. I'm not sure if there are any questions. I don't see any. Any questions from the audience that we should take? Not seeing any hands. Then I'm gonna go on to the next. So, like, let's play that out further. Right now, we're talking about advice to founders, and I think a lot of them, you know, like are this kind of environment, you know, getting these insights directly from the investors is very helpful. How do you suggest they go about fundraising in this kind of an environment where there aren't so many events to meet people? You know, like, I mean, are cold LinkedIn reach outs acceptable? Like, if not, like, how do they actually find you? You know, like, how do they speak to you? How do they make sure that, you know, they're getting enough exposure? Maybe let's start with Philipp.
Okay, good question, actually. So our companies have the luxury that we make sure they get enough exposure. So we have a network of like hundreds of investors, and we make sure we organize, for example, a demo day that's now happening virtually. We present all the companies, they create a video, they create a pitch deck, which is available for all the investors. And we make sure our investors that we work together with, they take a look at that. I mean, that's point number one. I think after that, if they once they are in the community, I would say, like, just do business more or less as usual. Yeah, good teams create good results, and good results will be seen in the market. And if you are not able to create good results in terms of revenue or user growth, take this time and focus on your product. And this is what a lot of companies in our portfolio did. They took the last 9 months or 6 months to really focus on the product and actually work down their driver ticket line to make the product working once, like, the market comes back, etc. So these are the two advices. One is like, use your network, make sure that you're on demo days, etc. And the second is like, if you don't have like a revenue to present and you don't have the big story to actually tell, don't try to create an artificial story at the moment. Yeah, but focus on developing your product and creating good results that you can tell forward. And these results, they will still be heard from our point of view.
I want to go into that second Pandora's box, unfortunately. So, I mean, this use your network advice. I hear this a lot, but I find personally that it's advice that do not apply to everyone, because there are a lot of underrepresented founders coming from underrepresented communities out there that unfortunately, you know, are are disadvantaged by familiarity bias, right? I mean, if you're somebody that doesn't come from a network that's connected, how do you go about building your network? You know, like, how do you speak to the right people? How do you start on this journey of building this network?
How do you start the journey building this network? I think this is exactly where we want to step in as Entrepreneur First. I mean, people do not found companies because they have a lack of knowledge, they have a lack of network on there, and they have a lack of access to capital. And this is exactly what we provide. We provide access to capital in terms of a stipend, in terms of a seed investment. We provide access to knowledge in terms as we are establishing a shared language and guidance and methods about how to navigate to an ideation maze, how to actually build a company, how to deliver a proof of concept, how to find the right co-founder. And then, of course, most importantly, how we give you access to a network in terms of venture builder, entrepreneur in residences. We onboard you on a community of 2,500 selected individuals globally. And of course, I'm very aware we do not provide this for the whole ecosystem, for all founders. We only provide this at the moment for the founders that are accepted in our program, but that's our starting point at the moment. And I think that's our contribution to the ecosystem at the moment. But you're completely right. What we found out in the beginning, or not in the beginning, but what I found out when I joined, that one thing is to just make sure people know about this kind of offering, because, for example, Entrepreneur First is really unknown in Germany at the moment. It's quite famous in London. In London, we get more applicants than Google, Facebook together sometimes from Oxford, Cambridge, and LSE. In Germany, we don't. So what we try to find partners in the community and in Germany that can allow us to share the stage with them, to give our offering to these kind of communities, because that's the first thing, actually, to get heard and to spread the offering, make your name, make you heard.
Yep. So, I mean, once we get to the point where Entrepreneurs First is like operating globally at a level where you're able to find all of these outliers out there, then that stamp of approval from Entrepreneurs First, I guess, is enough. But I mean, let's assume that we're not there yet, right? I mean, so maybe I'll throw it to you, Florian. I mean, if a company comes to you without that stamp of approval from an Entrepreneur First or any other like strong innovation program, how do they go about it, right? Like, I mean, if they let's talk about false negatives, right? I mean, a lot of people apply and not all of them get in, obviously. And there will be some false negatives there where they're really good, but somehow didn't make it through that filtering process. But if they still want to hustle and try to figure out like how to actually make it in this world, like what advice can you give them, Florian? Like, what's the best way to reach out to you? Like, you know, building this network. Again, I'll ask the LinkedIn cold reach outs question. I mean, does this work? Should people be doing this?
So again, it actually works.
Okay.
Of course, we are over flooded and a huge flow and whatever. And now, actually, certain things. For example, we during the pandemic changed our website and have now 3 buttons for people who want to work for us. There's a button for companies looking for money, so you can submit and you go in a database and you can follow up on that. Makes it much easier than just being pinged through LinkedIn. And it's the same, by the way, for the investors. And we have investors reaching out to us saying, guys, I want to learn more. And in a database, it's an easy thing, easy to put in place. And we did this for the first time in the history of the fund, of our company, during the pandemic, because saying we need to be in contact digitally, number one. Second thing, I think, especially working with entrepreneurs and a lot earlier stage now in startups, I think it's extremely important to recognize that as the fourth industrial revolution has its downsides, it has also its upsides. And the upsides is storytelling. So in order for you to be visible, you have to think about your business plan, fine, and you have your pitch and everything, fine. The freaking mantra of the company. What is the wrong you're writing with what you do? And by the way, you don't have to be the most innovative and the most disruptive in something. No, you can take a business model which exists somewhere else, works already in a different country, different geography. I mean, Tobias was a little bit hinting to that in some you have localized models that works. But also, I believe very important is the storytelling. So show stuff on the ground. When you do something, what happens with your customer? You know, what is better? And not being too much focused on a business plan, the financials, going through it, but really bringing in the emotional side of it and the meaning of what you're doing. And that actually helps you also within the team. Again, I'm saying that because if you provide valuable content, not blah, blah, yeah, if you show what is happening with your products after proof of concept, and it's not just you, but it's the one benefiting from the proof of concept, to bring that up. It's not very expensive. You can have that out there. And then it's really to engage, number one, with investor communities, like Entrepreneur First and others. And there's so many incubators and accelerators around the world, thousands. But there are communities to tap into. Second thing is, you need to make sure that you are on the social media front, you have relevant content to provide about the mantra of your organization. What's your positioning, what's different, and why You know, what's happening on the ground. And the third one is really, and this is, again, I shouldn't say it's too loud. Yeah, but you need to
please do.
You need to be pretty on the neck of investors. So
Okay.
to be there, we have huge piles, you know, and so many companies look at the time span is so short, so many data to shovel. So therefore, if you don't go just one and ask for permission, try different angles.
Perfect.
You know, data-wise.
That's very, very helpful. We have 30 seconds. I have time for one last question. You will have to field it, Tobias. So speaking about being on the neck of investors, so the question here says, what would you recommend from an emerging market standpoint when approaching investors? Because in those markets, they're used to dictating the terms. So how do you actually try to flip that in your benefit?
Not sure if I'm the real expert to answer on that, because we're not searching in emerging markets.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Then let's maybe throw it to Florian. How do we push back against you? You know, when you're being too pushy, like how do founders push back?
How do founders push back?
Because investors are used to dictating the terms, right? Like, I mean, and as a founder, you need to come to that negotiating table and be able to, you know, flip that script also, and somehow be able to, you know, fight for some terms.
Yes, my recommendation is the twofold, and these are opposites. Okay, number one is when there's money on the table, don't think about dilutions and shares. You know, make sure that you have enough runway. So when there is money, reasonable, of course, you take it. Don't go in circles and strategically and whatever my leverage, number one. The second thing is, that's on one side. The second thing is, you need to be ready to walk away. And it's a fine dance, persuasion. So you get, again, the clearer you are that you're able to walk away, it's not desperately, I need it, the better it comes across. You know, that's psychology, and that's even on an energetic level. Because at the end, the decision of an investor is not based on facts. It is not based on numbers.
Yep.
It's an emotional decision. Do I believe that this guy or this team is crazy enough to go all the mile what they want to do, and they will stay and doing this, and not I invest and maybe 2 years later the guy wants to do something else.
Perfect.
And I'm stuck in there.
Perfect.
So those are the things. This is really where you need to come across adamant. This is the thing you want to do, and you have to build your story from your own childhood down. Why this is the thing you want to do, not just another business because I've seen the gazillions, the market size. I don't care. You know, it is something. Are you infected enough to go all the mile?
That's a perfect way to end. I think we're ready to walk away now. Thank you very much, gentlemen. All right.